Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I am your host, Franco, and I'm joined today by my friend here, B Level, aka Ewoks Unhinged. The name of his YouTube channel is Ewoks Unhinged. He's a communist commentator. He's been around for a long time, and I think he has a lot of interesting things to say, especially regarding the topic that we have at hand right now. If you read that title, Cult of Personalities in Alternative Media. How to bypass it. We see cult of personalities all over the place here in alternative media, like whether it be like on the left or the right, or just people who call themselves independent, people who call themselves communist, libertarian. It's all over the place. But I just wanted to get this man's perspective here. B level, what's up, man? How are you?
Hey, thank you for the kind intro. And yeah, I mean, I've been doing content for about as long as you've been. I would say I've been on YouTube for about 4 years now, but really around the start of the pandemic was when I started feeling the need to put out
Same.
more political content. And yeah, but it's funny because as you mentioned, that's like kind of a long time in terms of dissident left spaces, because especially with the quote unquote online communist scene, it's got a high rate of turnover. Actually, a lot of people, they stay in this space as a phase, kind of like punk rock or goth or emo. It's very similar to that in a lot of regards. So I guess I've reached maybe the old head or lifer phase. I don't know, maybe not yet,
Hey,
but
I've been seeing that too, at least with some of the audience members who I would see around a lot, and then like I don't see them around anymore. Like back when I
yeah.
used to watch more channels, like I wouldn't even see them like on other people's channels either, or on like the discords or any of that. So
Yeah,
yeah, I
we'll
definitely
get
do
in.
see that. Like people find independent media or alternative media as like a phase, and then after that they just like
Mm,
kind of move on or just like read more casually.
yeah,
Like
it's interesting because we spoke prior off air in preparation
yeah.
for this stream, and one point we actually, not only in terms of familiarity with the tendency, but also some of the specific individuals, we'd encountered some ultra left characters a couple of years ago who they're gone, they don't exist
Yeah,
anymore,
and I
and
know
it's
exactly who you're
interesting.
talking about.
Exactly. And they were like so adamant about revolution and all of it, very ultra left, very burn it down. And it's so funny, they're completely gone. And the most common thing I hear about, and those are a couple people that we knew on a name to name basis, but there are many of that tendency that I have outlived on YouTube, even in the last 2.5 years or so. And the most common thing I hear when these ultra lefts leave is, oh, they got a job, they finished school. That's the most common thing. Like, they become an adult essentially. And I gotta say too,
Damn.
in fairness, had I started this in high school, it would have been way more ultra left, way more utopian versus more scientific. Because I started this after I was done college in my 20s, basically. So there's a huge difference there. I think being a working adult in this space versus being a kid, because kids will get wild, and I don't blame people for that. But I wasn't like so many people. We didn't put our teenage years on the YouTube. So you just hang out with your friends. Whereas a lot of people with COVID-19, this became their middle school hall or their high school hall where all the
Oh
drama
yeah.
happened. And unfortunately, that turned into politics as an outlet for emoting versus actually kind of having thoughtful discussions as you
They
have on your
they
channel.
become edge lords online, right? And
Yeah.
there, yeah, like you mentioned, like there's a lot of these like pro-revolutionary people, and then there's also some people who don't wanna be edgy but not too edgy, like where they to the point where they step out of their comfort zone, and then they end up watching like Vosh and those people, because it's still like
Yeah.
keeping the status quo, right? Still voting for Democrats and all that. And then like over on the right too, like you see these like people that are like are into Andrew Tate, where they start like adopting these like incel or like misogynistic
Right, right.
viewpoints, or they start watching like Ben Shapiro and all that, and then like they're like rallying on with him when they're ranting against Megan the Stallion or who else I can't other female rappers for like the things that they say. right?
Right, and it's interesting because a lot of these right wingers, I posted about this on Twitter the other day. They claim they're so censored. It's like you have 100K views. You are not censored. You are not shadow banned. Like everyone listening, I implore you check out my channel. I am really proud of the content we put out, but it is shadow banned to heck. Believe me, like it is. Prior to certain political events happening, the channel was on the ups. Views were relative on parity to subs. Like I was getting like 75% of the sub rate was viewing the videos. Now it's like 10% of the sub rate are watching the videos, and the shadow banning and the censorship has hit real dissident channels very hard. It's very difficult to grow. I know for a fact since the latest stage of the Russia-Ukraine happened earlier in February, I've had no channel growth, essentially, despite the fact I feel like this year, in addition to parts of last year being the best times for the channel, actually, in terms of content. But yeah, we can get into the censorship a bit, but maybe that's not
Yeah.
the topic of this one. I know you have limited time.
I mean, it ties into it too. Like, it definitely ties into it. Cape Socialist says something interesting here. He says, "Nah, man, you just get more radicalized."
But people
I
burn
will
out.
say, I just want to say, like, people definitely can't unlearn the stuff that they learned, right? They're gonna learn some truths about how the system actually operates, like how the government operates, how these corporations all work together, and how they're all owned by the same people. You're definitely not gonna unlearn that. It's just
Yeah,
that they become more tame and they're less obsessed with continuously watching all these different personalities
right.
online,
Just
and it
really
becomes more
quickly
about the
to
information. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just to really quickly correct Cape Socialist in chat. I said the latest stage of Russia-Ukraine, so it began in the coup was in 2014, but we could even look back to World War II in terms of the
Or
West
even further
courting.
back.
Yeah, it
Uh,
goes back into the 20th century, really, and throughout the Cold War. But I just
or
want to make that note.
even more. Like, as one of my guests has been Shadowban, he's been talking about how this goes back like hundreds of years, how it's been like a battleground. Ukraine, like that region's been a battleground.
Right,
Um,
right.
but yeah,
And yeah, I just wanted to make note of that because, but in terms of the censorship of dissidents and independent media in the West, it's really ramped up since this latest phase of the conflict. It's quite extreme. I will say. I haven't. I would say after the January 6th event, there was an increase in censorship that I noticed was it was more noticeable than the year prior to that. But really, this year I would say has been one of the worst years for shadow banning and censorship of dissident content. And I can't really give advice for people on how to beat it because a lot of people they look at this like it's some kind of public square. And it's not. Like you think you're skateboarding at the public park, you're skateboarding in the shopping mall. You know what I mean? They control where you can be, where you can't be seen, etc. So I don't know
and
how we beat that, to be
I
quite
will
honest.
say though, since we are talking about like these different cult of personalities, some people do get like censored for maybe they give like some truths or maybe they take it to the next level. It becomes an extreme, and not everything that they're saying is true. But they use the fact that they're getting censored as a way to try to get more support and a following from people, and then they go on these other platforms like Rumble and be like, yeah, check me out over here, where they are allowed to grow even more, even though Rumble is still owned by like the same people, pretty much these same billionaires. um, and let's not forget also that the Vanguard Group and BlackRock and all these firms own pretty much everything. So yeah, I mean, you've
Yeah.
seen that too, right? Like they'll be like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
look at
and you
me,
made
like
a that's a really good
I'm getting
distinction.
censored.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction there. Somebody who gets censored because they do something blatantly TOS versus somebody whose content is consistently shadow banned for their politics. Those are two different things. So an example would be, say somebody is directly harassing someone on Twitter and using slurs on the basis of some component of their identity, right? That's TOS. They get a slap on the wrist from Twitter. They're suspended for a couple weeks, and they go, "Oh, look, I got banned," and it's like, no, you were just like being a prick basically, and harassment isn't tolerated on these platforms. Well, sometimes it is, um, and that's the reason they receive some kind of punishment from big tech. Whereas us content creators like myself, who have consistently dissident opinions, trying to undermine Anglo-American imperialism, like people like us, we're like pushed to the back rooms. Like we are not favored in the algo at all. Those are like two very different things.
Yeah, and then with the Rona, let's not forget, like when there were people that were going over the scientific literature and stuff, like Ryan Christian or the Last American Vagabond, people like James Corbett and Derek Bros, like they were getting censored very early on in the beginning stages of that, and like they, if you even have them on as like guests and talk about these issues, like the videos get taken down. At least for Ryan Christian with Last American
Yeah.
Vagabond. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
I'm
um,
not, but I know anybody who criticizes big pharma really gets hit. Like
mhm.
Ramiro, he had John Potash, who wrote the book Drugs as Weapons Against Us. They did a whole episode on big pharma, and it's only on, you can see it on Odyssey, but it was banned off of YouTube. So it's interesting. And all of this stuff with the drugs, this goes back quite a bit. Like I'm sure people have probably mentioned the opium wars on your channel at some point or another, but it's always been an imperialist strategy to keep populations down, as well as if we can look at the quote unquote like crack cocaine epidemic, right? How that was pushed onto communities within the United States, and how that ties into the wars in Central America as well. But we probably don't have time for that because it's quite a convoluted mess. But people should go look that up.
So you've been noticing, like when you ever since like you started here, that there's a lot of people in like the audience that watch your show or that watch similar channels as yours, that I guess they see some truths or some things that resonates with them that some of these personalities say, and then these people seem like so intelligent since they're talking all this stuff about history that they don't learn in school, but and
Mm.
some of it can be true but some of it may not, but they see these individuals as really smart. They learn a lot from them. They start to understand, all right, yeah, the system that we have right now shouldn't be like this, and they adopt communism. But then they also may adopt almost everything that their favorite commentator puts out. Right? You want to speak
Yeah,
on that a little bit?
absolutely. So when I came to the scene, um, I think there is a difference between how things were pre-COVID and post-COVID. I do think, even despite the censorship, in terms of the actual quality of different content creators, it's significantly better now. I feel like the quote unquote communist or tanky space, there's actually you have to dig to find this stuff though. Some of the best content sub 100 views. Some of my
Huh.
videos actually,
And
but
there's a
it's
lot of
true.
you guys. There's so many like channels that like make videos and stuff that are
Yeah,
like tanky or communist or
and
the like.
now I think what we're seeing that's actually quite different than before is we're seeing people who study scientific socialism or communism, and they're applying it to current day politics, which is really good. And that's what people want to see in independent media. They want to get an analysis of today. They don't want to hear about the Paris Commune, breaking down minute by minute what happened, because an interesting phenomena I saw, specifically with a lot of more Eurocentric supposed online communists, where they would study like, oh, they know everything about the Paris Commune and specific events that Marx and Engels wrote about, yet they don't know anything about the global South, for example, or anything about the history of the Americas. And I found those people very boring people to speak about. It's like the only points of history you know are literally stuff referenced by Marx here or there, but you haven't really studied history outside of that, because there's a lot more to add to. And of course, Marx was people brought like primarily like a lot of stuff in Europe, but there's so much else going on that other Marxists built on after that expands the study. And there's a lot of, I find what happens is there's not a lot of progression once people nominally become a communist. Like they kind of assume I wasn't educated properly at school, or I didn't learn this. But then they become a quote unquote communist and they read like a book and a half, and all of a sudden they think they know everything.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because there's so much work out there. There's an immense volume of study out there that I'm still sifting through. I still have so much to read, but it floors me that you have people, they just read like State and Rev or something, and they think they're golden. And it's funny because at the time when I started, there were people who read two more books when I had read zero. So they seemed very knowledgeable. I call these the 2019 tankies, essentially. But
Mm.
then once I read those books and started reading more, I quickly kind of surpassed them, essentially. Not to brag or anything, because it's not much of an accomplishment to read three books over two. But I think more and more people in COVID came out of the woodwork, started educating themselves more, started connecting more, and the 2019 tankies of yore were kind of dusted essentially. Now, unfortunately, you mentioned some people who come as media figures and they have a whole set of beliefs that
Yeah.
it becomes kind of cultish that people feel compelled to follow. So one of those would obviously be Haas from the Infrared Collective. Now, at first, his collective, mind you, it was a collective. It wasn't just one guy. It was seen very
Yeah.
fresh and very exciting at the time in early 2021. And for anybody listening, their content was considerably different than it was even post the BreadTube debates. And they said, we're heterodox. We want to bring more ideas in than just your cut and dry 2019 tanky. So I think that kind of disruption, that was that moment, more people were brought into the folds. It showed, hey, you can actually read different stuff. Not necessarily contradictory stuff. In some cases for them it was. But you don't have to just be a stereotypical tanky. You can be a scientific socialist in the way you factor everything in to your study. Now, what became negative about that later on was Haas then became a dogmatist himself, and became, it kind of for a while opened things up, but then it closed things off later when their kind of MAGA communism cult basically kind of crystallized, which took place over the course of 2 years. And I would say the big two personalities prior to that I think still they're the ghosts of them kind of plague the
Yeah, I
internet
know
common
exactly. I
space.
think I know what you're gonna say, right?
Yeah, Mop and Unruh, right? The supposed second Sino-Soviet split, which that alone should say a lot about the pathetic state of
Oh, but you're
internet
you're
commerce.
referring to like people that are not pushing for voting like Democrats and all that, because there, of course, there's like the Vash and like the
Yeah,
all
they're
these
soft
other like
socialists.
non-tanky commies, right?
Yeah, I'm referring more to like the hard socialist,
Yeah,
communist, Yankee side. Caleb Maupin and Jason Unruh, they've kind of got kind of a scorned lover dynamic where like a love hate frenemy type thing. They were friends at one point, then they hate each other, and their two tendencies really defines, I would say, the online um, North American quote unquote communist space. And I would say what the Maupin tendency became, what the Unruh tendency is, are a left and right deviation of communism. Like imagine within communism, the goal, like communism is like far left, right? But the goal of it within that far space is to find this golden center, right? Which some people have spoken to and still veer right. But essentially, you have Unruh who veers ultra left and Maupin who veers right deviationist. And as many people know, Maupin's out of the scene for now due to certain actions within his org.
yeah.
And he, say whatever we want about that guy. And I have to say, personally, from my analysis, because I don't know everything that went down, I wasn't in the org. But from what I understand, he clearly, and from things I've seen, he lacks kind of a conflict resolution and leadership skills that are very
Hmm.
important in organizing. So when he left the scene, that vacuum really left a space for MAGA communism to then ascend to what that is now.
I was gonna
But then
ask you about
Unruh,
that. Yeah, like
Unruh has
what
the
came
flip
after that,
side.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Go
Unruh has the
ahead.
flip side where basically, oh, American and Canadian workers have it too good. They'll never organize. And, like Unruh is the flip side of that. And I've always tried to find the middle. And I've been attacked by both tendencies. And further, when I've criticized one tendency, people love me in that. Then when I criticize their tendency, then they hate me. So it's like if you have a nuanced take within that space, it's like you almost kind of like you got to pick. If you want to be principled, you
They
got to
get mad
realize
that
you
you're
have.
not agreeing with everything that their tribe agrees with, right?
Right, it's very tribalistic, and it's really frustrating because, for example, so a big thing in Canada, right, amongst the more cosmopolitan Greater Toronto area left, and these are actually real life organizers and organizations. They're very opposed to kind of reaching out to the deindustrialized, rural, predominantly white areas, right? Um, be, because they're for supposedly for decolonization. Mind you, most of these people in the GTA are upper middle class whites themselves, and they harbor a certain resentment towards their kin in the regions maybe their parents or grandparents came from. So for me, I was like, I think we can reach a lot of people in the deindustrialized areas. And then, so these leftists from Toronto were calling me a quote unquote settler socialist, but I've always had a plurinational orientation. I just didn't know all the words because I was still studying at that point. But what's very interesting was later I was defending, anti-colonialism and indigenous sovereignty in Canada. Then all the chauvinists who are like, the MAGA communist and that orientation, then they all canceled me because like, oh, he's woke now, and it's like, no, I was always for uniting
If you're
the
not part of our
indigenous.
tribe, then you're woke. You're part of the woke tribe, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
their
funny because
thinking.
I always stated I was for uniting the indigenous, the immigrants, and whites from deindustrialized areas and rural areas. I said that's the coalition that we need. And it's funny, I was very transparent about that. Yet I've had people on both sides of that, the right deviation and the ultra left, say I'm one or the other. Like people, like it's wild. These people are obsessed by what my opinions of white people are. It's crazy. It's like I just want everyone, to have a good life and build some socialism. But it's funny that uh, yeah, these different deviations, they just need to peg you, and it's like maybe should it occur to them that we should be trying to transcend a certain kind of tribalism that occurs on the left and try to find something that builds a more broader tent coalition. But I thought we were communists, so.
Yeah. Now, what's your problem with what came after the patriotic socialism that Caleb Maupin was promoting? Now that MAGA communism was being pushed,
Yeah, it's like
I
the
well, from
highest
what
stage of that.
and from what I saw, like on social media, they were trying to. A lot of them were trying to talk to people that are MAGA, and they were like just not having it. They're like, no, we hate
Yeah,
communists, and I think that this has to do with something you pointed out earlier is these people they come into the space, they start being informed, and they like get excited that they read like one book, and I feel like those are like the loudest people, and then they
yeah,
get ahead of themselves, they get overconfident, and then they like get addicted to arguing with people online, trying to show off how smart they are when really they have very little. There's still very little that they know, and they're
absolutely.
not taking like a humble position, where it's like maybe I'm wrong, right? There's not that self-awareness within them where they think that to themselves, like maybe I'm wrong here,
Yeah,
maybe I'm right on some of these things, but maybe I'm taking a approach that's just like too extreme, or it's just
yeah,
like
and for
you
people
could.
listening, for those who are like kind of learning some of these terms right now, I've used communist and scientific socialist interchangeably because it means the same thing. We're not utopians. We're scientific in approach. And Franco, you have the background in science. You can kind of understand the scientific method, how we would approach things. And I think one of the most beautiful things about realizing you're wrong about something is you can then be on the path to actually have a more correct position.
Yeah,
And as I've advanced on positions and as I've kind of learned more and kind of sharpened my analysis, it's really interesting because I've seen people who say they were critical of a past stance I had, and then I leveled up on that stance, and they're mad that my stance is even better now. And it's like, what why are you mad at the progression? And it's like, yeah, they read a book and a half, and they just want to stay there, and essentially, theory to them only exists to reinforce their perceptions of
their
reality as
biases,
opposed, yeah, to
their
sink in their
comfort
biases.
zone.
And it's interesting because at the start of the stream, we mentioned some of the ultra left, quote unquote, Wowists or Maoists who have dropped off the scene. And what's interesting is some of these chauvinistic, patriotic characters, some of them are dropping off too. Because there was this one dude earlier in the year, he was so. He was actually he watched. He was a fan of the show. He showed up on the stream a couple times, but he was becoming a proto MAGA communist. And me and some of my comrades, we were trying to sit him down, like, "Hey, bro, you're actually wrong about some of your positions, and a lot of folks aren't really a vibe with what you're saying." And he was so convinced he was right, and sure enough, his channel is deleted now. So it's really like you said, some people they really get ahead of themselves because you know, it's a long game at the end of the day. It's not like I get it, right? You see all the issues in the world, you read the manifesto, and you're ready for revolution tomorrow. But just because you're ready, it's about the critical mass of the people. It's not just you as an individual. Your emotions don't move the masses, you move with the masses. And I think that's something like, it's because we're inculcated in this kind of like liberal culture where we see things through that individualist feels over reals kind of thing. But a communist materialist, and, you know, uh, yeah, the revolution isn't driven by your diary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like they get excited and ahead of themselves, and then they're like, they think they can change the world now that they learned this bit
Yeah,
of information, but there's still more to learn. And with the realization of that, there has to be some self-awareness. There has to be some understanding of human psychology.
mm,
But yeah, they're only, that's the problem when you're only like just doing politics or only like reading history, but not also reading. And I don't know if like you do this, but not reading stuff on like consciousness or reading stuff on like um, uh, human psychology or spirituality, but or at least philosophy, right? If
yeah.
like the,
Well,
the
because
stuff on spirituality scares some people, philosophy, like
yeah,
read more on that so you don't fall into these like traps where you
well,
start like hero worshipping and all that.
Marx himself was a philosopher, right? And he falls into that canon of modern philosophy. So yeah, I used to be. I'll be real, especially going to a college because I wasn't in a liberal arts degree at all. But seeing philosophy students, things like that, it seemed kind of snooty. It seemed kind of like very self indulgent. So I was like, well, what is this? But through studying, actually becoming a scientific socialist, I realized, oh, there's so much merit to this, and asking deeper questions about humanity because Marxism falls into that. Um, and I think too, a lot of people, a huge mistake a lot of people make in socialist spaces, because it's collectivist, right? But they also kind of completely erase the role of you as a component piece to the whole. Like, and Liu Shaoqi, who was a Chinese communist, he spoke of this in a very good piece called "How to Be a Good Communist," where he talks about this idea of self-cultivation. And a lot of people associate that with like the hustle, the grind, capitalism. But think about, instead of improving yourself for your own self gain or vanity, improving yourself to be a better community member, better family member, better comrade. These are all very important things. And a lot of people, as they adopt a systemic analysis, they kind of assume, oh, like it's easy to slip into a victim mentality. It really is. And you do need to have a victor mentality if you're in a communist space. But the thing that differs us from conservatives is we understand that victor mentality comes, like, we overcome obstacles together. We can't just go it alone. So it is a mix of understanding how you are a piece of the whole, and you matter in this struggle too. So that kind of like make you think about like health and how that is very important. And we're not just bookheads. We also got to take care of our physical health, our mental health.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I really like that you have a focus of that on your channel, and that kind of self-awareness and consciousness is something sadly really missing from communist spaces. And it's actually, I want to let you speak a bit more because it's your show, but it's a reason why I've kind of moved away from the channel explicitly being a communist channel and just being a politics channel, despite having the socialist analysis. But yeah, like self-awareness, all that. What do you think there? Like, because you've probably
And
seen
yeah,
some of this.
like you can still, like, if you came from like a communist background, you can still maintain some of those communist principles where you're like upset with the system and the people who control it right now, and like the people at the top, right? You got to be aware of what they are currently doing right now to make you weak. What do they have control over? Agriculture, pharma. Like,
Mm,
how is this affecting you and the way that you're thinking? It's
yeah,
affecting your health. It's affecting your gut and all that because of all the poison that you're putting in yourself with
absolutely.
all this ingredients and stuff, unnecessary stuff that they put in your food. Then like it's affecting the way that you think. They control our education system, so you got to be aware of what they are currently doing right now, in addition to
Yeah,
being aware of what they've done in the past, like with history. I feel like a lot of communists have got the reading up on history thing right, but then they're not aware enough of what people are currently doing now, and then they think that they can
yeah,
solve our issues with like just electoral politics, like things that like Voss and these people promote, or with like
yeah.
MAGA
Or the soft
communism, thinking
socialists, but
that yeah,
you
like
make a good point there. Essentially, and it's really funny because I was talking to this one guy who's a king of cope, let's just say, and he was spamming me Lenin quotes, and I'm like, dude, I'm not gonna read you spamming me Lenin quotes. I got that on my shelf. I can read that myself. What have you internalized of the knowledge? But it's really funny because it kind of speaks to what you were saying. Is that a lot of supposed online communists, they they're very stuck in a certain decade. There's a lot of value to be learned from reading theory. I don't want to downplay that, but the point of reading theory is to inform our present day analysis, and there are parts that
yeah,
change.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
something important to note. And what's so funny is the same people who are stuck in the 20th century who just quote spam different writers. It's so funny because Lenin himself wrote in his time how a lot of uh, uh, his contemporaries were living in the 19th century. So it's so funny that you see that same. They claim to love Lenin, yet he couldn't stand the people that
and
were stuck in the
and
19th
and
century.
bro, they think that they can have the same kind of revolution that they had in like the 19th or 20th century.
Mm.
Like when you're talking about like a lot of these ultra leftists, like they think that they can have a revolution the same way, like picking up arms and all that. Like they're going to end that, like the way that our system is right now with all this surveillance and everything that's happening right
Mm.
now. They're gonna end that before you even start.
And it's
They're,
interesting because just how much of a lockdown and how fed up things are in the first world. It's funny because I mentioned Unruh, I mentioned other ultra lefts, and I kind of have the analysis like I'm big on supporting any revolutionary progressive currents in the global south. And it's funny because people are like, "Oh, are you a third worldist now?" Because you were critical of people that believe we can't organize in the the quote unquote first world, and it's like I objectively follow where is the revolutionary base happening. So I'm looking at Latin America right now, for example, for this hemisphere. But I still believe in organizing here too. That's the difference. That's what separates me from like an entire third worldist. But I am objective about okay, where is the most revolutionary base happening, and to have a geopolitical analysis beyond just within the state of Canada where I live. So I look at like a more totality of geopolitics. And I do think, shout out to a lot of people you've brought on. You've had a lot of interesting discussions about like
hmm.
multipolarity and things like that. I think it would be fantastic to bring on me, Ramiro, maybe some of his comrades, and then some of the people of the more libertarian left persuasion
Hmm.
that are on your show, who I think are intelligent
That'll be
people and I
really
think
interesting. Yeah.
very thoughtful. I think it would be a good discussion because I won't spoil it too much, but I'd really like to compare the present day thing to the quote unquote like the European multipolarity of pre World War One, which differs quite a bit. But anyway, I won't get into that. That's a whole tangent. Um, but yeah, like a lot of online communists, it's basically the arrogance that you know it all and the desire to be right about everything. And
Yeah.
it's I do think it comes from the culture, especially in the colleges and liberal arts degrees. Not to sound too much like a conservative here, but a lot of it it's an ego thing. It's a like you said, it's a narcissistic culture in capitalism.
Yeah.
So people, it's their ego if they're incorrect. Whereas if we're thinking like communist, collectively we want to get the most correct line possible, and that requires struggle, that requires discourse, a dialect. And I think it's so funny. I've heard from so many different dogmatists, you're going to be in the dustbin of history because you don't follow me. And I'm like, you're not thinking critically. The dustbin of history is already where you are. Like, you're already, if you're not willing to change on any of your points and you think you have all the answers, my question is, why haven't you had your revolution yet if you have all the answers? Why aren't you forming a government?
Yeah, yeah, that's why the best solution that I can say we can have right now is like in the mind, we have to become more aware of ourselves, and realize that some of these things that we attach ourselves to that we think are solutions are not going to work in the way that we think that they will. But the more we become aware of the problem and inform others of what the problem is, then the closer we can get to actually achieving these real solutions. The best we can do now is talk about ways, things that would be a good first step, right? Having stronger communities, being less reliant on these corporations,
Yeah.
like growing your own
'Cause-
food, having like pushing for more like community farming and all that. Those are things
exactly.
we can do right now. In
Because we're in
addition
a
to promoting more consciousness and self-awareness and all that. But what do you think are some solutions for like
no, I
bypassing
fully
these cult of
agree.
personalities and alternative media and things we can do now with like the system?
Yeah. So in relation to what can we do now, kind of like what the Panther said, survival pending revolution. Um, because we're in a period where people are waking up right now, and a lot of us
Yeah.
are still asleep. A lot of us are half asleep. And it's a process, and that raising of that kind of class consciousness. That's like we're in the process of that right now. So a lot of the ultra lefts that we both encountered, they're ready to take up arms. It's like, the people aren't ready for that. You need you need the mandate of the people before you're going to do any kind of popular revolution.
You're gonna
And
scare them away. It's counterproductive.
when you've built nothing, you built
Yeah.
nothing. You're telling people you want them to fight, and you built literally nothing. What Franco is saying, right? Where we have community gardens and community institutions, the communists fulfilling the role where the state is negligent, right? That's building the dual power. You're actually building something to actually defend and actually fight for. We have none of that yet in presently in Canada or in the United States. So let's learn from people who are building, like in Latin America and in other parts of the world. That's a very important step. Let's humble ourselves. Let's study what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, what's being effective today, and be very conscious of the fact that these outlets we're doing right now, we're doing it for political education. That's the main takeaway I've had in my time on YouTube. This is political education. This isn't vanguardism. At the second you start thinking you're the vanguard because you have a YouTube channel that's hot, it's like you're not. And that's when the ego starts to grow. You think you're the
Yeah, and
vanguard.
do you think you're bigger than you actually are? Because it's just like the people who follow your channel are such a tiny portion of the population.
Exactly.
It's not even
Like, you
it's not even 0.1% of the population. That's just like the country too. Like
Yeah,
it's so
it's
small.
funny because I'm a pretty small channel, right? But then a channel that gets maybe 5 times the views of mine or 10 times the views of mine, they're like, I'm making so much more of a difference than you. And it's like, dude, it's like and most of your audience are video game players. Where I actually speak to a lot of my audience, a lot of them are on the ground organizers, and a lot of them are very
Mhm.
serious people in study. So I know even if I'm hitting a small amount of people, it's a conscious bunch, and we're learning from each other. And the reason I do the channel is not to be famous.
It's more effective too, right? Because I have
Yeah,
confidence that people that listen to me are not just listening to me because they're in a phase, right?
yeah, like
This is like I'm pushing for continuously informing yourself, looking at facts rather than to follow me as like I'm like guiding you, as like your leader, and we're gonna like have a revolution or
yeah,
gonna form a group of people that will like help a third party win and all that.
yeah,
When
because
uh,
I've actually started to do more networking in Canada about this type of stuff, but it's not this channel. This channel is discussions to get people thinking,
yeah.
whereas kind of organizing is trying to be more active as part of like a socialist movement in your country. That I view that as separate, and I don't view this isn't the Vanguard outlet. This is actually just for me to get to talk to people like you who are very insightful, and I can further my own, expand my worldview.
Excellent. Yeah.
And that's like the benefit I personally get, and I hope that's what the audience gets from it too. That I think people who are on this journey with us at this point, because you and I, we've been around the block for a little bit now, I think people are, they get it. They're kind of
Yeah.
like in a similar headspace. They're not the LARPers. They're not the it's just a phase. It's something real, and I think like content like yours and Ramiro's are stuff I rewatch. You know what I mean? It's stuff like I think about after the stream is
And
over.
not for entertainment.
Yeah, it's not junk
Because
food
you
content,
found
right? Like,
it confounding and very informative. But like a lot of people rewatch content of like these other personalities because they found it entertaining. They're like, oh yeah, they really got that other guy really well. Like, oh shit, he told Bosch really well in that video. Like he made him look dumb. Like they find that entertaining because
yeah, like I
they
don't like
think.
debates. I
Mm,
have hosted like one debate on the Russia Ukraine stuff where we brought in mature comrades to talk about the geopolitics, talk about multipolarity, and it was very insightful, informative, and the audience reacted quite well to it. But that's a mature discussion amongst adults, with the point of the audience learning something. Like the debate, bro, stuff of like yelling and screaming and turning yourself into a meme, like is that I just don't even get it, man. I really don't. Like, I mean,
and
if I
we
was in
should. I
high school, maybe, but like
Right.
I'm in my mid
It's
twenties
low
now.
vibrational, low level of it's a very low level of
Yeah.
consciousness,
Oh, by the way,
and
shout out to Cape Socialist. They said they're interested in connecting with some of their comrades in Africa. Hit me up. Drop a
mm.
comment on my channel. I would love to do that because it's always an honor getting to talk to people across the world.
And the
But
last thing I'll say here is that we should really be questioning why a lot of these channels, a lot of these personalities get
mm,
pushed out a lot by the algorithm. Yeah, may get censored on some things, but then they have like other videos where like they get pushed out, and you got to look at the topic too that they're discussing. Maybe it's because the algorithm works in a way that it wants to keep you confined in one tribe where you're
mm,
distracted by attacking other tribes rather than
yeah.
seeing the bigger picture and seeing what your tribe is wrong about and that you shouldn't be in any tribe at all. Because
Yes.
the algorithm, like that, the way it works right now on social media and on YouTube, it works in a way that it pushes it's trying to enforce an ideology on you so that
Yeah.
you can stay trapped in that tribe, in that ideology,
Yeah.
and not grow from that.
And one point too, that just a lot of people who follow those, because some of these other, I'll call them influencers, really, or cult leaders, whatever you want to call them, they're similar age to me, right? Like one of the dudes, he's the exact same age as me. His audience is predominantly high school aged boys. My audience's age is a bit older. I would say it's more people in their 20s and 30s. There are some younger people that watch in the comments, I think. But even then, even though my audience skews a little bit older, I'm still conscious that younger people can watch it. So I'm not trying to act like a goof. I'm trying to inform.
Yeah.
And one thing that like Haas and Jackson do is they tell um, people what they want to hear. They don't ask the question, especially I'm looking the male angle here. They don't ask the
They're
question, how can
speaking
you
with
be a
narratives rather than
yeah, it
speaking
was
with
like
facts.
how can you be a better man, right? Giving people Andrew Tate communism is not creating better men for the movement. And I'm passionate about I'm a guy, right? So I'm passionate about making better because like, like a shout out to the female comrades, like they're the people that can really bring a lot of knowledge about the feminism and all of that stuff. And my role is to make better men for the movement who are more conscious, who are willing to put their ego second to actually build something better. Like that's the mandate I've been given. And when I see other dudes telling guys just play video games and watch your Twitch streams and all of this, no shade to people on Twitch, there's everyone's trying to get by, but it's just like you're keeping these dudes at that low vibrational
Yeah,
level, and you're also telling them be misogynistic, be
it's
a bunch of
it's
goof really
it's
that
little
grown men
boys
and grown women
making
don't respect.
yeah, it's little boys in
Yeah,
a man's body making content for other little boys, some of which are also in man's bodies.
that's a really good point
Yeah,
because
and
they're not building guerrilla armies. They're building like macaque monkey armies. You know, it's like little. These aren't like
who
strong
just stay at
apes. These are like
home
little.
playing video games.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like it's. And what's really funny is I saw a crew of them. They actually took a photo outside this LaRouche conference, and it just showed it all. It looks like it was the same people that be at the video game conference. And I'm like, that's embarrassing. Like if I form a socialist organization, when we show up, we're gonna show up. You know, like I want it to look formidable. You know, because like this stuff matters. And I think the results really showed when they go live, just like when Charlottesville happened, right? All those alt-right neo-Nazis, they showed up, and like they're a bunch of nerds. They have one like tough skinhead-looking dude who cries on the camera when Antifa punches him. So it's like, like one thing that can really kill the image of a movement is when they show up in real life off the internet and everybody sees their presence is not formidable. That really can kill a political movement. And I think what it comes to is these influencers. It's so much easier to cultivate an audience whose sole existence is to profit them versus create work on like developing people, to actually be participants in a socialist movement, which is the highest calling for any person out there. And it's tough, especially if you're a young man. It can be tough to like look in the mirror and think, what are the areas I can improve on in my life to be better. But you want to be around guys who encourage that around you. You want to have a good older brother figure, whether that's your actual brother or not, that can. I'm an only child, but like that are positive influences. Like I like hanging out with dudes who are positive influences, who have high energy. You know what I mean? Like I don't like some guys. They want to be the one alpha with a bunch of nerds or whatever, but it's like, are you really an alpha if you can't be around other men who are of high caliber? That's what I question those characters.
It's insecurity there and immaturity that's being projected there.
It's
B
with
level thinks
intelligence
a lot.
too. I really want to be just like with people like you and Ramiro. I like being around people who are insightful, who are smarter than me, because that can only benefit me. So thanks for hosting me, man.
Absolutely, man. We got to continue this conversation. I really appreciate it, B level.
Thanks, man.
I
I'm
could
looking
keep
forward.
going, but I gotta head out.
Yeah, I missed being on with you and Ramiro a couple weeks ago when I was sick, but I'm really happy from the viewer perspective. I got to listen to you guys. It's always a treat listening
Awesome,
to you
yeah.
and Ramiro
It's definitely
talk.
gonna happen.
And let's all get together. Let's do the part 3 of this kind of series.
Bet. All right, guys. Take care. Stay informed. There's gonna be more stuff like this to come.
Peace.